few hours after the containership Dali destroyed the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, there were media reports suggesting investigators would look into bad bunkers as a potential cause of the accident. The National Transportation Safety Board ruled out that possibility after its initial investigation, but this incident alone gives us a good idea about the perception of the bunker sector in wider shipping circles. The negative image of the bunker sector isn't surprising, as some of the court cases arising from the past couple of years, contamination issues continued until very recently. The highest profile contamination incident occurred in Singapore in 2022, when around 80 ships reported issues with their fuel pumps and engines after receiving contaminated fuel oil at the world's biggest bunkering hub. Investigators found that Glencore had sold some of the tainted fuel to another supplier, and the two had offered it to about 200 ships. The Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore, regarded as the gold standard in bunker regulations, proved that it would not tolerate bad bunkers, as it subsequently suspended Glencore's bunkering license for 2 months. Despite Singapore's best efforts, mistrust of bunker suppliers is still widespread as some quality and quantity issues persist. I'm Enes Tunager, Sustainability Editor at Lloyd's List, and in this week's podcast, we've asked two prominent executives from the bunker sectors to tell us how the industry can improve its image.
Bunkering has been the usual suspect.
That's Konstantinos Kapetanakis, who works as the chairman of the International Bunker Industry Association alongside his day job as bunker director at Starball.
How we overcome this? Well, I can tell you why. We are trying as DPA to be the upholders of the principles which should permit the clean energy industry. Predominantly transparency and quality based on facts. So to raise standards and stay away from the sensationalism which I told you earlier. Now, we have to make sure that the public knows what EBA is doing. And this is a campaign which has started very seriously a few years ago, but is intensifying since I took over because I'm a very recent chair. I assumed office in April, so I'm only here for about 3-4 months. And this is my main campaign, to make EBA more visible so that the bunker industry is no longer shrouded in any mystery, because there is no such mystery. If you speak with ship owners and bunker suppliers alike, you will hear that yes, indeed, skepticism still exists up to a point, but we have definitely seen a development towards an improved relationship between the two sides. And this can only be accomplished when the bunker industry is fully open in any sort of control, quality control, governance control, full cooperation with authorities, and of course, when the commercial dealings between sellers and buyers of fuels are open, transparent, and to a high level.
First things first, there is and there has been a big problem with respect to the general perception and I would term it almost inherent mistrust and cynicism about suppliers.
That's Chris Turner, bunker quality and claims manager at major marine fuel trader Integrate Fuels.
There was an IBIA BIMCO survey in 2022 where I think 91 or 92% agreed that there was a need for increased transparency between bunker suppliers and buyers.
Contamination and short supplying are serious issues that the bunker sector must deal with. But what is the data telling us about the quality of the fuel supply today? Integrate collected data from over 120 million tons of bunker deliveries in 2023, and here's how the bunker suppliers fared.
But if we look at the data, which we can see within Integrate, we still only see that 2.7% of all fuels are actually off specification, and that means beyond 95% confidence from a specification limit. And out of those, realistically, perhaps only 4 in 1,000 of them are parameters that we would really consider critical. So things like aluminium and silicon and sediment, the type of incident that you suggest may cause difficulties on board the vessel. It's even less for gas oil, by the way. So, it's certainly not a train wreck.
Most bunker suppliers and buyers agree that there are easy wins for the industry to improve its track record. The most obvious measure is to make mass flow meters mandatory, as these devices ensure buyers receive the quantity that they pay for. Singapore made mass flow meters mandatory over 7 years ago, while Rotterdam and Antwerp will follow suit in 2026.
We are extremely and clearly in favor of mass flow meters, and we have been quite vocal about that. Since we were the first ever association which instituted a specific working group on mass flow meters and bunker licensing, engaging with all pertinent stakeholders in ARA, first of all, which after quite some time mandated the MFMs, and we are very pleased about that. And of course, following the example, very successful example of Singapore. So with respect to MFMs, we are of course totally in favor, and we encourage the suppliers who are members of EBA to adopt the mass flow meters.
So if you talk about mass flow meters, I think certainly that is would be seen as a very positive step. I think the issue is, who's going to do this? Unless it is mandated, is a supplier going to invest in the money for mass flow meters and put them in place? Another study regarding the trust and mistrust, or should I say, actually said that even a fully licensed MFM was still questioned by some. Ultimately, mass flow meter is the best solution we have right now. But there are still the same problems on board the ocean-going vessels with respect to poor calibrations and things like that, which still mean there are quantity disputes. So I think, look, the first things first is that if we talk about mass flow meters, these will develop as fast as either a port wants to demand this. So, for example, obviously in Rotterdam, now you have Rotterdam, Zeebrugge, Antwerp actually looking to mandate it in 2026, but Amsterdam are not. You have other ports, I think Sohar is an example, I think, where they're on the route towards going down licensing schemes. All these things will ultimately support the implementation of things like mass flow meters. Now, the issue is this enough? And my perspective is the only way a mass flow meter system will work sufficiently and will generate the required amount of trust is that if there is a proper system like there is in Singapore, for example. Singapore have gone to great lengths to make sure that they've increased the transparency and traceability, but there's real examples of the MPA prosecuting people, taking licenses off people, issuing demerit points to people, quality-wise suspending licenses, as we've seen in recent years. It's all well and good having the systems, but you've got to underpin it with the required controls as well.
Another key measure that bunker suppliers can adopt is the latest bunker fuel quality parameters published this year by the International Organization for Standardization, usually called ISO 2024. As today, a significant number of deliveries continues to use obsolete standards dating as far back to 2005. Bunker industry stakeholders believe buyers must demand the newest standards for suppliers to introduce them as soon as possible.
As far as ISO 2024 is concerned, yes, indeed, we believe that many changes have been brought forward, which will significantly alter to the better, I hope, the marine fuel landscape. And we have recently conducted a members meeting within EBA with experts on that field, which explained to our attending members the intricacies of this new ISO. What will the market do in this, though, is, as you can appreciate, a business decision for each bunker supplier and for each bunker buyer to either insist or not in obtaining fuels according to these standards. Now, I believe that the market will conform and fuels will be compliant with ISO quite soon, because they provide a lot of fine details and great, quality parameters for biofuels, for VLSFO, for everything, which is coming more and more heavily in the market, especially the biofuel standards. So yes, EBA is behind all these new developments, which can only assist the bunker industry increase the quality standards.
From the quality one, ISO 8217 NS, I think it's a bit similar in some senses. If someone mandates it, if a port mandates the requirement that you have to comply with the latest version of ISO 8217, then again, suppliers will ultimately follow suit. The problem is that right now, and if I just give you a picture of what's happening at this very moment in time, only 1/3 of residual fuels and only 1/4 of distillate fuels, which we trade at Integrate, are actually traded on the 2017 spec, which until a few months ago was the latest version. I think that tells you the challenge that we actually have to get the industry to move to the latest specifications. Put it simply, the industry will only move as fast as the charter parties move by changing to state things like latest version, or if the port mandates something like this. The supplier, I don't think, will fall over himself to supply the latest version of the specifications unless he sees it's worthwhile, or unless he sees that he's starting to lose business as a result of not supplying them, if that makes sense.
Shipping's decarbonisation drive will undoubtedly introduce a more challenging bunkering landscape, as we are expected to see a multi-fuel future that may include more dangerous products such as ammonia and methanol. Quality and quantity will become ever more crucial in that multi-fuel future, as green fuels are believed to be several times more expensive than fuel oil. Rising demand for biofuels has already increased the administrative burden on bunker suppliers, as several firms have been rushing to obtain licenses from the International Sustainability and Carbon Certification, also called ISCC, to certify that their supply is actually sustainable.
I feel for the bunker suppliers sector, to be honest. My profession, as a bunker buyer and one of the biggest shipping companies, appreciates the difficulties and the challenges that lie ahead. At the same time, as chair of the association, what we keep on urging our bunker supplier members is that they have no other option than to closely follow, monitor, and at the end of the day, implement whatever new regulation and condition is decided centrally. I don't think there is much of a choice here. Times are evolving dramatically quickly, and all of us in any sector or subsector need to adapt. How they will do that? Well, obviously, as you touched upon, that carries difficulties depending on the size of each company. Obviously, smaller companies will have bigger challenges to overcome. But I do not believe that smaller companies do not have a role to play in the future. The demand, the variety of clients, the geographical disparity will be such that everyone will be needed.
These are big challenges because this is very different to what we've done in the past, in a sense. So, for example, in the past, use ice cream as an analogy, and with fuels, in the past, fuels used to be just plain vanilla, and very little change. Then, of course, you go to IMO 2020, and then we got all different flavours of ice cream or fuels, as they'd be, different viscosities, different types of fuels, etc. And of course, as we develop on now, we're not just going away from conventional fuels, slowly but surely into the world of alternative fuels. And this is going to bring huge challenges to every stakeholder across the industry. I mean, if you're talking about from the perspective of a physical supplier, what are the biggest pinch points? Well, first things first. Okay, so you've got to understand what your customer wants. I would argue that right now, one of the biggest challenges we actually have in the industry per se is that there isn't enough understanding behind what is driving the change. What are the expectations and requirements of your customers, and what you have to do to be able to compete in the new world of alternative fuels? I go as far as saying that, it's not for everybody either. I think this will ultimately probably lead to some suppliers probably sailing away over the horizon, never to be seen again. Perhaps the new world is not for them, moving from the old opaque world, as we call it, to one of transparency, and maybe they don't have the infrastructure or the backup, the support services necessary to be able to bridge the gaps on commercial requirements, on system changes or skill levels. Perhaps even they have to go out and recruit somebody to actually bridge those gaps. That's maybe the only way. But ultimately, you've got to continually adapt and evolve. And this industry has, been in it for some time. And the one thing that never ceases to amaze me, just how reactive we are rather than being proactive. And if there's ever a time to be proactive, it's absolutely now. So I think one of the largest things is training. So we need to get all that in place. And of course, at a corporate level, and this is where it really becomes a bit of, I think I would term it survival of the fittest.
As one of the biggest marine fuel consumers today, Konstantinos also shared his views as the bunker director of Starbulk. His views will shed light on how decarbonisation will affect the bunkering business in the coming years.
I think we will definitely see companies which up to now had nothing to do with either shipping or, of course, marine fuels, entering the retail business of marine fuels. And we, as a matter of fact, in EBA, we have a few of such producers becoming EBA members, which shows you first the variety of membership, which I mentioned earlier, but also the willingness of these companies to enter a new field for them and to provide services to a new target group, of which up to now they knew very little. New models, as we said earlier, when you asked me about how will bunker suppliers cope with all these new changes, we will definitely see. As I said, even smaller companies would need to create such an internal structure which will allow not only the adherence to new regulations and to new requirements, because it will not be as it is now toward the, let's say, 1,000 tons of VLSFO or HSFO or 200 tons of LSNGO in any given port. The nature we will not reach the spot buying of new fuels too quickly. You can appreciate it will take some time, and so all these new models will have to cater the fact that we would be talking for possibly more long-term agreements or more niche agreements in terms of location, in terms of volume, certainly in terms of quality, in terms of emissions reporting.
The bunker industry players are very willing to rebuild trust among the wider shipping community, and adopting the highest quality standards and latest technologies would definitely help them in that quest, as they'll only have a short period before decarbonisation shakes the whole industry to its foundations and quite possibly prove to be an extinction level event for some parts of the bunker sector. We'll be back next week to ask whether shipping really understands maritime security. Until then, thanks for listening and take care.